Hello and welcome back to another video of my creative life with Sweetie, where we read books, we make art, and essentially do whatever our creative hearts desire. Today, we are covering Black horror recommendations across the board. Movies, books, shows. During the readathon, it's only been a couple of days, but one thing I've really noticed is how long my TBR has gotten ever since the readathon has started, and even in preparation for the readathon. And a lot of people have also been telling me that the same has happened for them, which is the whole point of this readathon. It's not simply to read Black horror only in February, but to also hear about some really great stories that you'll want to read next month and the month after that, but to just fit them into your TBR naturally because of finding out about them. So just all over discovery. And one thing I've been noticing is that some people are even watching movies along with their books throughout the topics of the week and everything, and I thought that was really cute. But I also know that some people don't know anything past maybe a Blade movie as far as Black horror, or Get Out as far as Black horror is concerned. And so I thought that I would also do some recommendations for shows as well as movies, and some books if you didn't see them on my Instagram and throughout the rest of the month. I thought I would share some of them here. We will be splitting up everything by topics, as well as the movies and the shows and the books and everything. But let's get into it. I'm really excited. I found a lot of great movies that have been added to my watch list from doing research for this video, and I think that there's going to be someone here that you maybe not even know about. So let's get into that. So, as I said before, I'm going to be splitting up this video into not only movies, shows, and books, but also into each topic that we'll be covering for the I Love Black Horror Readathon. So that'll be vampires, witches, monsters, and spirits. It's a lot of content to cover. However, I did find some really interesting things while doing this research. So some topics have definitely a lot more to cover than others, and we'll kind of talk more about that as we get to it, because I do want this to be more of a discussion. I did this type of video back in October for cozy, spooky, and I think I put scary. I forget what term I used for horror films, like horror films. But I made categories for each and then gave movies, shows, and books for each one. So it'll go similar to that. Go watch that if you haven't. There's some really good films and movies and shows and books included in there. But it will be a little bit different because we will be just having this screen in the background, and it'll be a little bit more laid back than that one is. One, because if you notice in that video, I had a problem with lighting as well as my camera focusing. I have a very standard vlogging camera, and it works very well for what I use it for. What it does not do is really focus on what it needs to focus on, considering when you have moving pictures in the background. This is fine. As soon as some zombies want to show up on a screen and run around, all of a sudden it's moving in and out and it's freaking out. I don't know what it is, but honestly, I hated how the last movie recommendations video came out, on all honesty, because of the lack of focus and the lighting situation. And just to avoid that and focus mainly on the information I'm giving you, I thought, let's just have something playing in the background. Some hearts for Valentine's Day, and for the theme of the readathon, and just kind of talk mainly about the information and a little bit more laid back. We'll do this for the series and the movies recommendations, and then we'll head back into my book corner, my library corner, to talk about the books that I'd recommend for each one. So, that sounds good? That sounds good. And we're also going to be going through the topics in a different order. So, and you'll see why that kind of is in a moment when you start seeing how much information is within each topic. I think that's all the information that you need to know before we get into everything. Now, let's get into everything. To start off, we're going to start with monsters. And the main reason for that is because there was so much for me to use for monsters. One, that may be because I have included things like serial killers or slasher films and stuff in the monster category. It's a very loose category. I kind of did that on purpose because, you know, you don't want to get in the weeds with this stuff. Like, you just want to go monsters. Okay, what do you think that is? You know? So that did help a lot. But all in all, I was happy, very happy to see there has been so much horror monster flicks that have come out featuring main characters of color. So happy, so excited, that are just simply main characters of color, not social political agendas, which we love. We do love that. But sometimes we just want a main character to just be a main character. And I'm happy to say I found a lot of films that are featuring that. Also, a lot of films that have social political commentary, which y'all know I love in my thrillers. So we will cover that. But that was a great thing to see. Another topic that we'll be covering did not come out so nice. I'm looking down at my notes because there's a lot of information to cover here. Just know that when I'm looking down. Okay? To start off, I thought that we would kind of start with some of the universal type monsters because I thought that that would be kind of cute and obtainable for a lot of people who are just like, monsters, I get it, Frankenstein. Speaking of Frankenstein, if you want an adaptation of Frankenstein, you've got an adaptation of Frankenstein. You can watch The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster. It's a great film that came out in 2019, I believe, and it has Denzel Whitaker. I think that's his name, Denzel Whitaker. Well, regardless, it has to do with Vicaria. Vicaria is her name. She's really smart, but she's growing up in the hood, and her brother actually gets shot and gunned down during some gang violence outbreak. She is under the belief that death is actually a disease that just needs to be cured, and a mad scientist is born. She essentially turns her brother into a Frankenstein type character and monster as she tries to bring him back to life and actually succeeds. However, as we've learned in the Frankenstein film, that whatever comes back is not an actual person. So now she has to deal with her brother, who is now a monster, even though she brought him back, but that's her brother. It's a whole situation, and honestly, it's a really great retelling put through the lens of this young woman as she's trying to work out how to survive in her circumstances. Really great film. It's right now streaming on Shudder, and if you'd like to rent it or are able to rent it, you can do so on Prime Video. The next film that I'd like to talk about is Sweetheart. So again, in that whole universal monster type trope, if you are a fan of The Creature of the Black Lagoon, you would probably be a bit of a fan of Sweetheart. So this is starring Kiersey Clemons. You may recognize her. Well, she's gonna be in that new Madam Web movie that nobody's gonna go see, to be honest with you. That's coming out like in a week. But she's also been featured in plenty of other films, but she plays the main character in this one. She has become shipwrecked and on an island that seems completely inhabited. She starts to see evidence that people did live here at one time, but for some reason they no longer are living here, and she figures out real quick that there is a monster or entity in the ocean that comes up out of the ocean during night, and she has to fend for herself from it. Basically a great monster, sea monster film. And this was from Blumhouse, I believe, which that was another thing I found out from doing all this research. Blumhouse is giving you plenty, it's green light and black horror. There's certainly so green light and black horror and making sure that black actors are in these roles. I found so many Blumhouse horror films that I'd never even heard of. But go check out Sweetheart if you can. I think it's now, you can only rent it. It's not streaming anywhere, which completely sucks. The next film that I'll be talking about is, it's streaming. And it's a Hulu original, so if you have Hulu, you're in luck. This one's on there, and it's never coming off. So, and that one is Little Monsters. You might have heard of this one already, but I actually find out quite often that a lot of people have never heard of this film for some reason. It's starring Lupita Nyong'o, and it has to do where she's like a kindergarten teacher. She takes her class out to like some safari type field trip and everything, and while they're out on their field trip, a zombie outbreak, well, breaks out, and her along with 2 others have to essentially protect these children from the zombie outbreak. And there's plenty of like scenes where it's like funny. It's very comedy. However, it is rated R. Please do not watch this with your children. It is gory. It is very much the herb blood. It is a zombie movie, although it is also like lighthearted, funny in a way too. It's kind of like, it's very Zombieland-esque, but a little bit less goofy. Great film, absolutely wonderful. Completely recommend you to watch it if you want something that's like a horror film, but it's still lighthearted and isn't necessarily going to give you nightmares. The next one that I would like to talk about is probably one that you've heard a lot about, but for some reason, I also have found out that not a lot of people have actually watched the film, although they've heard about the film, and that's Wendell and Wild. I love the film. I think there were a lot of people that I had heard who did watch the film who just felt like it didn't live up to some sort of expectation, I believe, that they had, and I don't know, but talent jumped out on this one. Wendell and Wild is a Monkey Paw Productions film. It is animated and it is currently on Netflix. I believe the writer of Coraline, Henry Selick, also like helped with this film, which is insane. That's a crazy co-op. It has to do with our main character. She's been sent to a private school of some sort, but Wendell and Wild are 2 demons who kind of get in her head about bringing back her parents, who both died in an unfortunate accident. It covers social issues. It's really cute. It's queer, and it's adorable. Honestly, I really like this one. You watch with your kids. You can watch this one with your kids. Don't watch the other one. No. But Wendell and Wild is currently streaming on Netflix if you want to give that one a try. It is an animated film. So again, if you want a lineup between your Coraline and your Nightmare Before Christmas, try Wendell and Wild for a try. Okay, our second to last movie is one that I had never heard of. I'm not even certain who the who the production house is, to be honest with you. I heard nothing about it, but it is so interesting, and it's called She Never Died. You can find it right now streaming for free on Prime Video, but it has to do with this main character. She's immortal. She's cursed with immortality. Also happens to be a cannibal. I don't know if the 2 are related, to be honest with you, but it is extremely interesting. And if you are a fan of the Blade franchise, you should definitely check out this film. It's full of action. She's a complete badass. Like, because she is a cannibal, she actually seeks out bad people in the first place, and she beats them down and everything, and she kind of starts getting figured out by the police because she has some calling cards as far as the bodies. So, and it seems that it's like got a little bit of comedy in it. She somehow gets tracked down by this like loner teenager type, and they kind of strike up some sort of relationship there. But if you are looking for an action movie to pair with your Blade, and not just watch Blade over and over again, try out She Never Died. It's extremely interesting. It is gory, but it is a great ton of fun. Another one that I think kind of went over everybody's head this year that was in the theaters was Bones and All. This one had Timothée Chalamet in it, as well as Taylor Russell. It has Taylor Russell in it. That's her name, Taylor Russell. She's in it. This one is a cannibal romance. And I don't think that it was like, I remember seeing some trailers for this one. I don't remember it being marketed that way. I feel like if it was marketed that way, I would probably have tried to go see it, or at least like stream it earlier than now. It has to do with, you know, there's special people out there who, it's not just cannibalism because of you wanting to be a cannibal, but more so you can only eat that type of meat. It's a little bit of more zombies than cannibal, but like not dead, only living. I don't know, but honestly, it kind of seems like coming of age zombie romance. That's what the marketing should have been around it. I feel like they would have gotten way more people in those seats. I had not heard of, like, I'd seen the posters and everything, but I didn't know that's what this film was about. But you should go check that one out as well. I don't think that it's necessarily like a black horror per se, but the main character is a black woman, Zana Vinagi. This one is actually a history lesson. So, Son of Anagi is actually the first sci-fi film to ever have an all-black cast. This is a big deal. You know, all vibes, not much plot, but it is the first one to ever be an all-black cast, and I think that's interesting, and not enough people know that information. It's now streaming on, well, essentially, I think you can find it on YouTube. Some special mentions that I also wanted to talk about, but not get too far into, were Night of the Living Dead, which was another first and historical one. If you've not already watched it, and if you have during Halloween, here's a little bit of a tidbit, is that The Night of the Living Dead actually was the first horror film to ever feature a black protagonist. Made a lot of noise, it was a big deal, and it's very exciting to say that Night of the Living Dead, which is a classic to a lot of horror watchers, is actually a historical one for Black people. Another one to recommend in my last one would be The Werewolf Within. This one is definitely a comedy. It's a small town where essentially a werewolf comes and is taking over the town. Now, this one is interesting to include in this list because our main character is a black man. He is the sheriff of this town, and he is the only black man in this town. And he also seems to be the only one who has any sense. So, I think it's interesting to see where the film is gonna go. I kind of give this recommendation not seen the film before, but I do think it's something different and interesting that I think should be included in the list, just because you don't just want the same film over and over again. So I do see if you check it out, and if you have seen Werewolves Within, let me know down below if you liked it or not. Now, as for monster series, this was a little bit easier to knock down because, well, unfortunately, it was easier to knock down, and that's because there aren't tons of monster series. However, I did nail down a few that are personal favorites, but they're also pretty well known. One of those was Lovecraft Country. This is based off of the book. Now, what I did not know, I saw the series before I read the book. The book is written by a white man, which is very interesting. I have read the book now. The book is not necessarily bad, but it's one of those things where you go, okay, we'll say that was fine. Type of thing. But the series itself is also a Monkey Paw production, and it's very different from the book. Like, things that are happening in the book are not happening in the series itself. The series kind of comes off a little bit more sci-fi, and admittedly leaves you on a bit of a cliffhanger that I'm just not okay with it, but I also know why it got canceled. The series, though, is slightly based off of the book, and the fact that it has to do with our main character who is going to find his uncle, who seems to be in some trouble, bring some friends along. A lot of weird things are happening within the town, as well as conversations of historical nature being involved and intertwined with these stories that are happening with our main character and like his family and friends. The other show that I think that a lot of people missed out on is Swarm. Now, this one was filmed by Donald Glover and his like production crew and everything. I thought this was an amazing show, and I heard some people kind of say that it was not that great, or they didn't understand it. And I'm like, I don't know what you need to understand. She's crazy. It's a crazy fan. I thought that it was an interesting take on the Beehive Beyonce situation. You sat there the entire time wondering if it was a true story or not. It was a documentary inside of a document. I love this show. It's now streaming on Prime Video. If you haven't gotten a chance to watch it, please do. Honestly, the main actress, she gave a performance. You really thought that she was crazy. Honestly, you start to think she must be crazy. And personally, I just think that all of the scandal around Chloe Bailey being in the show and being half dressed and everything overtook what the main point of the show was, and all of the wonderful acting that was happening in that show. So if you want to check out an unhinged black woman, and a queer black woman at that, I recommend, Kiersey Clemons is in that one too. She's in that one. Okay, so there you go. There goes another Kiersey Clemons film. She made two things on this list. But go check out Swarm if you haven't. Also, I don't think I mentioned it before, Our Country is streaming on HBO currently, so go check that out. These other two, I feel like, I never heard anybody talk much about, or they're kind of in only certain circles and everything that I've heard them. One of them is From. This is an MGM original. I've heard people who don't even like scary or horror films actually love this show on like its interesting premise and everything. It takes place in a town where everybody's things are boarded up, and at night they cannot go outside. There are plenty of things happening in this town, and our main character is a black man. I recommend you go check it out. I personally do not have MGM Plus, and it's a little bit upsetting because I've been wanting to watch this show for now months. So if you have it, do what I can't. Please go check it out. It looks amazing, and I've heard so many good things about it. I can't afford another streaming service, but it is good. I have heard great, wonderful things about it. Go check it out. The other one, which I do have access to and I have watched, and I can certifiably say that it's a great show, is Archive 81. This one has to do with a film archivist who gets pulled onto a job at a home. It's on site, and he has to restore VHS tapes. Now, he starts restoring these VHS tapes, and he starts finding some things on these tapes that he doesn't feel like he should be seeing. A lot of it has to do with a cult, and they don't want to be found out. Some creepy things start happening. Some scary things start happening. Things start happening with the cassette tapes. He's living at this place alone. Fill in the blanks. It's a great series though. It's really, really good. And I highly recommend it. The same actor that's in this series is also in a movie called Black Box, which I'll talk a little bit once I get into the spirits recommendations. Now, continuing on, getting into movies and series of spirits. This one was another one that really wasn't that hard for movies to find. For series, we will get into it, but it is slim pickings. I am absolutely horrified at how small of an amount there are as far as series are concerned regarding black people. Like, there's no Haunting of Hill House for black people. It's very strange for me, and you know, if you've heard of any, please let me know down in the comments. I would love to check them out, but you know, scouring the internet, it was really hard to find anything that had a lot of like hauntings happening. I mean, that was one thing I noticed. The two that I did kind of put down, they're great, and I'll let you know about it. But let's get into the movies first. So first is His House. This is currently streaming on Netflix, and I believe it's a Netflix original film, but this one's really interesting. It has one of the same actresses that is in Lovecraft Country, and that's where I knew her from. But this movie has to do with two immigrants who've moved to the UK and on immigration visas and are trying to build a life there, and they get set up in a house. Now, this one's very interesting in the conversation of the wife is not happy to be there. She came to this country because she had to, but not because she wanted to. And her husband is trying to do the best he can to kind of assimilate into the country. They are already at ends, but the house that they're in is most certainly possessed of some sort. And it's starting to take the mind of the husband. The wife is also experiencing a lot of creepy stuff as well, but it's starting to take the husband, per usual in all of these types of films. So please go check out His House. It was a very creepy film for me, but I feel like it also touched on a lot of the racial immigrant issues in the UK that I don't feel like are shown in horror films as often, to really put them mainstream and really see how, because it you know, racism in the UK, especially for like immigrant and all of that racism, it's same but different than what we experience here in the US. So I really love finding films like that. And another film that kind of touches on that same idea as well is Good Madam, which is a Cape Town, South African horror film that has to do with, it's currently streaming on Shudder, and it has to do kind of with a haunted house possession spirit type of thing. Tsitsi's her daughter actually comes to the house that she is watching over. She's basically like the maid, or like the caregiver to the woman who lives in that house. She is a white woman. The film is completely, it's haunted. There's a lot going on in that house, and her mother is most definitely possessed at this point from working in that home as long as she has. Her and her granddaughter have actually come to this house, and them trying to, one, get out of the house alive, but also save their mother slash grandmother somehow while being in this house that is obviously possessed by some white spirit of some sort. I thought this one was another interesting one, as it took place in another country and it is translated, so get ready with your subtitles. Speaking of haunted houses, haunted apartments. Shudder has an original called Night's End that has a main character who has a YouTube channel but is a complete shut-in for one reason or another, and is almost positive that the apartment that he's moved into is absolutely haunted. He's sitting here filming it for his YouTube, and while it's blowing up, what he's been noticing is that people do not believe that his house is actually haunted and that it's actually all for show, which I think is a very interesting concept on filming, you know, the art of social media and filming things that are happening and people still thinking that they're not real, and how far is too far on catching things on camera, and whether or not it's actual evidence, and whether or not the shut-in is actually losing his mind or if his apartment is actually possessed. Another one that was new to me but is very interesting is a movie called Gatlock, where it's featuring the actress from The Umbrella Academy, if you watch that Netflix show. It's a comedy about a haunted game board. 4 friends come together after some time and decide to hang out and catch up. They bring this brand new game. They start playing it, they figure out that there's more to the game than they thought, and it turns out that it's haunted, and if someone doesn't win by morning, they'll be playing the game basically for all eternity. Very funny, it's completely hilarious. There's a lot happening in the film, and it's a little bit of a light haunting. It's a very funny light haunting, which, going into that, I do recommend if you're looking for something light to watch with your kids, or for something light in case you just want something that is just, this is funny. It's talking about spooky things, but it's funny. I recommend, highly recommend, The Curse of Bridge Hollow. The actress is from Stranger Things, but it also has Marlon Wayans in it. And to be honest with you, when I saw the credits for this film and everything, the trailer was like, oh, this seems so corny, I'm not watching this. And then I was bored, I watched it one day. This film is hilarious. I honestly thought it was so funny. It's a horror comedy type of thing. They're from LA and they moved to this Massachusetts town. They definitely get into Halloween and everything, but there's this story of Stinky Jack, who is some sort of entity that haunts the town. They're like, okay, whatever, especially Marlon Wayans, who's like very scientific, doesn't believe in ghost type, of course. Well, they end up bringing back Stinky Jack, and there are a couple of parts, like the clowns. I don't really like clowns. I don't like clowns at all. So that part was a little scary, I'm not gonna lie. There are a couple of parts, depending on your fear. There's no gore, but you know, it's a little bit like, oh, okay, that was a nice jump. A nice jump scare, but it's really fun, and I highly recommend it. It's now streaming on Netflix. Another fun movie that I'm positive all of you have probably watched already is Haunted Mansion. Although the Disney original is not a black horror, I do feel like the version with Eddie Murphy is actually considered a black horror. Stay with me now. The whole premise of the whole Haunted Mansion and the ghost wanting like the wife and everything has to do with the fact that this took place during the Victorian era, when she was a black woman who should not be with that white man. And they fell in love with each other. And that's why she was poisoned, because he wasn't right for her. Ramsley was just a racist butler. I'm just saying. On that criteria alone, I feel like Haunted Mansion should be considered a black horror. But it is hilarious. Not necessarily horrific, but it does have to do with spirits. Not everything has to be doom and gloom and blood. Alright? Most vampire things aren't even that scary. So, I brought it up in the last topic and I almost forgot it, and that is the movie Black Box. Black Box is an amazing film that stars the actor from the series that I just told you about, Archive 81. His wife has also just passed. He was in a bad car crash and is suffering from amnesia and forgetfulness as he tries to raise his young child. And he goes to a specialist who is going to try and help him get his memory back. In the effort of trying to get that memory back, they are doing some experiments and use with some machines where he's going into his subconscious, and he is pretty much haunted by his own subconscious, which is a very interesting topic as to why he would be haunted by his own subconscious, and if he's actually haunted, or is there something else at play, maybe in the machine, if you're looking for something that's a little bit more of a sci-fi horror. Also, just fitting it in right here because this is an upcoming movie that's not out yet, but it's coming out March 8th, so next month, and that is Imaginary. We're counting this one as a black horror. The main character is a black woman whose adopted daughter is... They both come back to her childhood home where there's a bear who used to be the main character's bear, and it seems like they were a little bit upset that she left him there. And the child is being basically kind of possessed, and there's a whole situation regarding the bear. If you saw the movie Ouija, you'll probably like this one because it seems like they're kind of pulling from that same thing about a possessed stuffed animal. But it also seems that there's some parts of it that are supposed to be kind of funny. So yeah, that comes out March 8th. Check that out. Now, series. Disappointment. There was so much disappointment in trying to find a series, and I just feel like you'll hear way more of that going into another topic that I'm about to go into, but finding series that had to do with black people experiencing ghosts and spirits and hauntings really was so hard. And it was disappointing how hard it was because it didn't need to be. Not in my opinion, not when there are so many books and films about black people being haunted by something. The fact that there were no series about this was just very eye-opening and interesting to me, and just completely disappointing because I just feel like it's not a hard topic to talk about, I feel like, in my opinion, especially when there's evidence of it being talked about, you know? So first off, as a series that's, you know, just made up and it's written, I recommend The Midnight Club. Now, all of the actors in this show are not black. However, the main character and a couple of the other secondary characters are. And it's interesting. It also is creepy. It's like creepy. You know, there's one story of one of the kids that's a little bit like, whoa, that was a deep one. And it gets you on a couple of jump scares. Currently streaming on Netflix. But if you haven't checked it out. That was it. As far as like shows that were fiction, that's all I could really find. And I only knew that because I had watched it and known that there were a couple other characters in the show that were black. It's just, do better. It made no sense to me that it was that hard to find a series. The other series that I have to recommend is Ghost Brothers. Now, this is not a fiction series. It's actually a ghost hunting series of 3 guys who essentially ghost hunt. They find paranormal places and they do the whole ghost hunting thing. It's streaming on the Travel Channel right now. My partner loves to watch ghost hunting shows, him and his brother, and I've watched a couple of the Ghost Brothers shows, and it's hilarious. They insert some comedy in. It's not as intense as the Ghost Hunters show, which I kind of appreciate, because in some of those places you could absolutely tell they're not haunted, and in some of those places you can tell they are haunted and you need a little bit of a laugh. I do recommend you go check them out if you haven't or heard of them before. I think the show is really great. That's all I have. That's literally all I have for series. I looked everywhere for some spirit series and I could not find anything. I don't know if, like, I was just looking in the wrong places, or really there is no shows like Again, Haunting of Hill House. I keep on bringing that up because that show's just really great. But that just offer majority Black cast or the main character themselves are really honestly like a main character, not a secondary character, because I also know The Fall of the House of Usher has some Black characters in it, but they're still kind of like it. That show's a little bit secondary. I don't know. I just very disappointed. Going to my next topic, the disappointment did not stop. Didn't stop there. Okay, sorry, I keep on doing this. I'm still figuring out. I don't really like it right here. I've already talked about how I don't like it right here. So bear with me, of course, per usual. But the next topic is witches. You would think I would be so excited for this topic because I'm excited for that topic in the readathon even. As somebody who loves magic, magical concepts, all types of studies of magic and everything, it interests me so much. You would think this is my favorite topic that I'm going to tell you about. And it's not. It's my most disappointing, to be honest with you, as far as movies and series are concerned. From doing this and doing a lot of research, I found that unfortunately, as far as series and movies are concerned, while there are plenty of Black witches for us to reference, they are all secondary characters to white women. There is barely any films whatsoever that the main character, the absolute main protagonist, is a Black woman. And that's disappointing because you can throw a rock at how many Black witches are in books. Tons and tons of Black witches in books. Or just powerful Black women in books. But yet on the screen, you'd be hard pressed to find them. I searched very hard for a series or a show or a movie or anything that had the main character as a witch and not a secondary character. And you'll see what I mean as I start kind of moving through these, because a majority of this list is me just doing special mentions for the witches we do have in media. Because what's confusing is that almost all of these witches that I'm going to mention are actually pitted as a much stronger witch than the main character that the show or movie is about. Hollywood feels that they can write a powerful Black witch, more powerful even than the main character, but they can't give that same witch her own series or a story that's bigger than the main character. It just doesn't make sense to me. And even from a standpoint of making money, it is clear from how many books have been written about Black witches that are selling out left and right, that there's obviously a want for this category, but there's a clear just disregard for wanting to write those stories. I have 4, including movies and series, that are the main characters are Black or the main character is Black. Everything else that is on this list, they are literally special mentions. And that's sad. That's really, really upsetting. I'm gonna go through these, but please keep that in mind. So yeah, all that being said, let's go into what I could find and some special mentions. Just really disappointing. As far as movies, Eve's Bayou. Thanks for holding it down all these years. Because as far as a movie regarding a fully Black cast that has to do with witches and spell casting and curses, Eve's Bayou is sitting up at the top. If you've not watched it, it has Samuel L. Jackson in it, as well as a very young Megan Good. It does have to do with a Black family, and Samuel L. Jackson's character is a doctor. He's shady. He's very shady, and is basically doing very shady things towards his wife, and the fallout within their family as those things are happening. And one of the middle children actually pays a voodoo witch to curse him. And it kind of all goes downhill from there. It's a great film. It's a fantastic film. I really recommend that you take a look at it. It takes place in New Orleans. It's swampy. It's witchy. It's deep. It's dark. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's a really great film. I think that you can stream it now on Prime. Another film, which you'll be surprised to hear, and it's on this, it's not a black horror, but in an effort to prove a point, I have it on here. And that is Twitches with Tia and Tamira Mowry. Not a horror whatsoever. I mean, there's like, you know, that darkness and everything, but it's nothing about this is scary. It's not a horror film. But when it's, again, a conversation of main black characters, Twitches. If you type in movie about black witches, you will get Twitches. Google it. Google it right now. Google in movie about black witches, and you will either get The Craft, which is not that, or Twitches. Another one where she's a secondary character, but I included it in this because it was an actual horror and it did have to do with a black witch, is the movie Spell. It's a great film. Loretta Devine. Yeah, Loretta Devine. And it's got Loretta Devine and Omari Hardwick in it. Really, in my opinion, it was a great book, a great movie. It has to do with the Omari Hardwick character. He ends up getting lost in the Appalachian Mountains. He gets helped by Loretta Devine's character, and she is actually a hoodoo practitioner. She ends up basically stealing him. And it goes into a whole misery trope type of thing where he's bedridden and is torturing him slowly and is doing some sort of voodoo on him and everything. He's trying to escape so he can get back to his son. I thought it was really good. If you look on Rotten Tomatoes, they gave it a 49. I don't know why I got a 49. I mean, I was scared. That's it for movies. That's absolutely it for movies. I didn't even go through the whole synopsis of Twitches because, again, it's not a black horror. I'm kind of just trying to prove a point. Again, disappointing. Series, it's even worse. I have two. I have Siempre Bruja, which is Afro-Latina. It takes place in Colombia. And the main character's name is Carmen Eguiluz. And it's actually, the show itself is kind of questionable, because the main character is supposed to be this extremely powerful witch who can time travel. But there's this underlying romance happening between herself and the slave owner's son. She, years back, was a slave and fell in love with the slave owner's son, who also fell in love with her, apparently. And although she can time travel and get her freedom, she still, on purpose, chooses to go back in time to when she was a suffering slave, so she can be with this man who is, keep in mind, basically owns her. They've had 3 seasons of the show, and the show itself, when you take that out, is actually a really interesting show. And I think for Colombia, it was a very big thing. It was very, like, having this Afro-Colombian, like, main character who's a witch and everything. There were some steps being made, but it still got so much further to go, and there's so much that's problematic about that. The idea that you could be the most powerful witch, be able to do basically anything, and you would still decide to go back for the conversation of, like, love. You would still go back to suffering, pure suffering. And it insinuates that slavery wasn't that bad if you could actually have the choice to go back. You would for love. And I'm all about romance, but something about that just don't sit right. And so it's on this list because, again, it came up quite a few times when I tried to find any sort of series featuring black witches. And I've watched the show, but not watched the show in depth, but I've watched the show some, and it is good. It is showing some diversity there, but it is problematic in the sense of the main character's origin story and how she chooses to use her magic. The next one, which is actually a brand new thing, I had never heard of this show, and really, like, run up the streams because this is an amazing show and it's now on Amazon Prime. Juju has to do with 3 millennial black women who are best friends, who find out that they have powers, and basically they're trying to figure out how to use those powers. It's like Girlfriends, but with magic. I love that. Why did I just now hear about it? Why did I not hear about this before? Why is no one talking about this in depth? I have never heard of this show ever. Another one that I came across was Wicked City. It's produced by All Black, another show featuring all Black women who all have magical powers. Why have I never heard of this show? I'm blown away by the fact that both those shows exist and they seem to be only streaming on certain platforms and at a very low amount because there's hardly any marketing behind them whatsoever. But that's literally all I found. That long list of monster films that I just gave you, that was me just going, okay, I got it. I got enough. This, I searched for 2 hours and found nothing and finally had to go, I have to start looking at some other topics. Now, you can see where my disappointment lies when I start to tell you how many witches there are that are on White Witch series and movies. We have Rochelle from The Craft, which, by the way, Rochelle was never necessarily, she was written in last minute. And if you hear about Rachel True and how it was being on The Craft, and that actually all 3 of the other girls in the film were doing press junkets and tours and stuff, and Rachel True was never invited to any of those. Actually, she was barely at the premiere. It's crazy to hear that. When you look at the film now, and if you ask any black woman, like who is one of your favorite Black witches seen in film, there's going to be American Horror Story Coven with Angela Bassett, and then there's going to be Rochelle. It's also crazy because I know so many people who watch The Craft for Rochelle's character because they feel seen in Rochelle's character, very much so. Rochelle is the only Black girl at an all-white private high school that, on the surface, definitely is racist. We're not even in microaggression territory. And she becomes friends with Nancy and Bonnie because they treat her like an actual human being, and it's nice to be in a group. And when she does get her power, she doesn't use it to make herself prettier like Bonnie. She doesn't use it because she wants to be more powerful like Nancy. She doesn't use it because she's trying to protect something or whatever like Sarah. She literally uses it on the racist white girl on her swim team. I know so many people who watch The Craft simply to watch Rachel True's character. Nancy is iconic, don't get me wrong. We love Nancy Downs. Best believe she's iconic, she's unhinged, she's wonderful. She is the moment. But to have a movie that a majority of the people who remember that film is because of the representation you had for this Black woman character who was powerful is insane. And she's still just a secondary character in the grand scope of the movie. Because at the end of the day, the movie's about Sarah and Nancy. It ain't about Bonnie and Rochelle. Second, not a horror, but again, iconic because it's Eartha Kitt, Madame Zeroni from Holes. Again, not a horror, but I just thought I would mention it because why not? We don't really have much to work with this list anyways. Also, Tia Dalma from Pirates of the Caribbean. I never watched that movie. I only saw the first one. But her character seems amazing. Bonnie and Grams Bennett from The Vampire Diaries. I'll admit I loved Vampire Diaries, and I'll admit that I loved seeing Bonnie because she was awesome and she didn't let stupid stuff get to her like everybody else in the daggone series. It was great to see her on screen every single time, and especially when they introduced her grandmother. But, again, secondary character. And again, secondary character who was more powerful than all the other people in this show, but never got her own series like the originals. I don't know. I don't understand it. You also have Prudence Blackwood, another bomb witch who was arguably stronger and a better witch than Sabrina in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, but also extremely memorable. Plenty of people I know watch the series, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, simply to watch Prudence Blackwood in that show. I know I'm one of them, as well as, oh, what's her cousin's name? Ambrose, her cousin Ambrose, he was also fine. Another Black man on the show, which was great. This isn't to like down any one of these things that are getting mentioned necessarily. I love that you guys even included those people in the film, and also Prudence and Ambrose in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina were extremely well-rounded characters. Like, me saying these special mentions are more so to make a note of the biggest well-known Black witches and warlocks that we know about in films and shows really come from being secondary characters in other people's stories. Marie Laveau and Queenie from American Horror Story Coven. Iconic. iconic characters. Angela Bassett as Marie Laveau, amazing. Plenty of people watch Coven simply to see Angela Bassett do her thing. But again, she's not the main character of the story. She's one of the stories. She's getting more screen time than normal, but she is not the main character. And again, it was just like, it's amazing to see in the show. This is not to down the show. It's to make a point of the fact that, like, we still only have secondary characters. Even the most iconic ones are still secondary characters in other people's films. American Horror Story also featured Behold Childless, played by Billy Porter. Iconic? Yes. This is an American Horror Story apocalypse. Iconic? Yes, absolutely. A warlock who's also, like, level-headed, thinking with his mind the entire time. Snarky and giving every scene. But nonetheless, they're all great characters. In my opinion, none of these characters I'm necessarily saying were written bad, but why do none of these characters have stories of their own? Why do they not have their own films? Why do they not have their own series? And the only thing, talking to my partner, I could come up with is that by creating those stories, not only are you showing the power that those people can have, but also ancestrally, we have always had connections to those types of powers. And what that means is that you're going to have to spend money to bring somebody who's an expert in those things on set. It is not easy as, okay, they just got a book and all of a sudden they have powers. Because there's a lot of implications of Black people having power. There's a lot of history and ancestral history of Black people and magic and power and all of that. And so if you do decide to bring those people on screen, you have to do your research. You have to bring an expert on, or else somebody most definitely will call you out. And I think that there's a fear of spending that type of money. But there's even a fear of just getting started in the first place to even do something like that correctly. But they have to get over it, because there are so many books. When I get to the books, nothing but books for Black witches. So there's proof that people want to hear that story. You guys just aren't spending the money to tell that story on the big screen. We're going to move on to my last topic for movies and series. Our final topic for movies and series is vampires. Yes, I saved it for last, even though it goes first in the weeks and stuff. I felt like this one was so easy because I feel like, as opposed to witches, we see plenty of Black vampires on film. I don't know what that's about. But I do kind of have a clue, and that has to do with the fact that actually one of the first American vampire novels, not Black vampire novels, just American vampire novels, is about a Black man who's a vampire. And not only that, but a Black man who used to be a slave, who was turned into a vampire after being beaten to death and comes back for revenge. It is also written as one of the first anti-slavery, like, short novels ever, and that is The Black Vampire, The Legend of Saint Domingo. It has to do with the Haitian Revolution and everything. It's a great little tidbit. There's your Black history fact, your little Snapple fact. But I think that because of that sort of trajectory, there is some connection between Black people and vampires that I think subconsciously we don't even recognize. One thing I did not struggle with was finding movies about Black vampires, whether they were hunting them or whether they were one. So let's go through those movies options. There weren't a lot of series. I will be honest, there were not a lot of series, but I most certainly found a lot of films. First off is Blade. We're just gonna get out the way. Blade's amazing. It's a layup, but I also feel like I've met so many people who've said they've never watched Blade, and it's hilarious. Arguably one of Wesley Snipes' best, like, appearances. It's funny, it's action-based, it's a Marvel movie. A little known fact, I'm just coming at you with the facts on this one. Blade was actually the first Black Marvel movie ever made. It was not Black Panther, because people forget that Blade is a Marvel movie. So, another little Black Snapple fact. Blade, he's a vampire, but he kills other vampires. Full of action, a little bit blaxploitation. It's amazing. If you like Matrix, you'll like the Blade. You'll like Blade. Next is Ganja and Hess. This one's a little bit more of a history lesson for you. Ganja and Hess is a 1970s movie about a vampire. Well, he's a scientist, and by being stabbed by a special dagger, he is turned into a vampire. He falls in love with his assistant's wife. It's kind of kind of dirty because the assistant is the one who stabbed him, but I guess he had that coming. And their kind of vampiric love story. They all look beautiful. They're beautiful vampires. Ganja and Hess. Another one that's a new one, I actually found this one this year, and wow. I watched it and was blown away. Very heavy, very dark. Tackles a lot of issues. You will be sitting there thinking of this film for quite some time, and that is The Transfiguration. I don't know how this one has flown under the radar, but it has to do with a troubled teen, Milo, who's dealing with the depression of not only just being on the spectrum, possibly, also the death of his mother, as well as his father beforehand, and growing up in horrible circumstances, and living with his brother who's dealing with his own depression and PTSD. Milo is under the belief that he is a vampire. You spend the film kind of feeling like you're wondering if he is. At the same time, as time kind of goes on and information shows itself, it proves that he probably is not. He is probably just depressed, extremely depressed. He becomes a serial killer from this depression and spiral, and is trying to figure out how to deal with his depression. His brother, at the same time, is dealing with his own set of depression and PTSD of serving a term. It's very rough to watch. I mean, it definitely has the blood and the body horror that's kind of going on in the film, if you're a little squeamish like I am. But it also has just deeper themes of how to deal with depression when you have not been given the tools to deal with your depression, and that depression can also be something genetically passed down, and that if you're never given the tools to deal with those things, how can a family line survive? I continue to think of this film, and I find out more and more symbolism that's kind of uncovered from it. But I really, really recommend it if you've not watched it yet. I'm positive you can probably find it on Prime, but I really, really recommend it. It was extremely dark and heavy, but it was also extremely moving when you really thought about what the movie was trying to say. Definitely watch it on a sunnier day, because it's a lot, I feel like, to watch someone go through. Something a little lighter. I do recommend you take a look at Day Shift, which is streaming on Netflix right now. It is a Jamie Foxx movie that also has Snoop Dogg in it. And it's really good. I did not think anything of this movie when I saw the trailers for it. I was like, oh, this is so corny. And then I looked at it, and one, the action's great. Like, if you're in for that action, vampire hunting and everything, it's great. It's funny. Jamie Foxx actually was pulling out some funny like laughs and everything. It was really good. He basically has a front as a pole cleaner. He's actually a vampire hunter. He's doing all of this to pay for like help raise his daughter, and he uncovers basically this like vampire uprising that's going to happen. Snoop Dogg's also in it. He plays a vampire hunter, and he's hilarious in it as well. Snoop being a vampire hunter is just top tier comedy, and there's some other recognizable faces, but I recommend you give it a look. I think that like a lot of people kind of like wrote it off as this cornball like comedy, but I think one, it does kind of count as like one of those comedy horrors because they do get into the gore, but also it's just actually funny. Me and my partner watched it just to watch it one night, and we both were like, not as actually liking that film. So I do recommend Day Shift. And also, if you're looking for something lighter as well, but it's still about vampires, and you're on Netflix, I will recommend Vampires versus the Bronx. So these kids are in the Bronx, and these white people start gentrifying the Bronx. They realize they're vampires. The Bronx fights back. It's great. If you're a fan of that John Boyega film, that Not They Clone Tyrone, which watch that as well if you have not. That's a great like cloning sci-fi film type of thing. Definitely check that out. But the other John Boyega film, when he was like basically a child and the aliens had touched down. If you're into that type of like film, definitely give this one a watch. It's in that same vein of like the kids versus these creatures and stuff. It's really good. It's really cute and just an all-around good film. Another film that has to do with kids hunting vampires is Black as Night. It has to do with high schoolers in New Orleans. They figure out the main character, she's visiting her family, figures out that there are vampires. She gets roped into basically this whole situation with these vampires and everything, and ends up having to hunt them down with a couple of friends. It's on Amazon Prime. I do recommend it. I don't think that enough people know about it, so I am recommending it because I really do think it's, if you're looking for a black horror type vampire film, I do recommend that one as a good one to check out. I Am Legend. A lot of people will tell me this isn't a black horror. I think it's a black horror. I think Will Smith being the last man on Earth in New York fighting vampires with his dog, that's a black horror. I'm counting that. I am so counting that. I just feel like if you didn't have context, I don't know. I just feel like, what makes it a black horror? If it's political, I think that's a slippery slope. As for shows, again, a little disappointing. Not a lot of like shows that have black vampires. We do have Interview with a Vampire, which there's the book is great. There's the movie, wonderful queer representation there. And now we have the show. The show, the main character is a black man. And he is black and I'm proud. And it's amazing. It's great. It's fantastic. He looks beautiful. It's gorgeous. Loved it. Check that out on AMC. They are streaming it on AMC if you want to check that out. That's it. The only other thing I could find that had a vampire situation with a black main character is First Kill, which is currently streaming on Netflix, and it is a vampire romance story, but not the main the black main character is not a vampire. She's a vampire hunter. She falls in love with a vampire. It's amazing, it's queer, it's cute, it's adorable. I do love watching it, and I do recommend it because I do feel like, you know, it's interesting and everything, and I had a fun time watching it. But that was really it. I'm going to put a little special mention here for Kendra from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, just because she's iconic. Not because that accent was tragic. But also, once again, Kendra was actually smarter and stronger than Buffy. And it's the whole reason why Buffy even has Mr. Pointy in the first place, because Mr. Pointy was hers first. And then she ended up dying for her. And that still doesn't sit right with me. But here's a special mention for Kendra because it was great to see her on primetime television. That is it for my movies and series. We've got to go into books next. And I've been talking a lot. I'm exhausted and I've been telling you a lot. And there's a lot that I'm probably going to have to edit out of this to make this watchable. But let's go into books because we have a lot to cover there as well. But now you've seen, you know, what we have working out there on the media. We need more witch movies. More black witch movies and series. We need more vampire series. And we need more ghost series. You see where I'm going? Like, it's hard to find some series that actually have, like, we want to see them reoccurring, not just in one film, you know? But all of these are great suggestions. I would not recommend things that were bad. So take this list. It's probably going to take you longer than February to get through it, and that's kind of the point, isn't it? Let's go into my library corner and get into the books. So, you may be saying, Kelsey, this is not your library corner. And I know, it's actually been almost a whole week later. I am currently editing this video, this long epic of a video. I have already edited out probably 45 minutes of footage, which is both an amazing problem because that means that's how much recommendations I had to give you. As well as not that great of an issue as far as me getting you guys a video on time. I've already let you guys know that it was coming on Monday, and I thank you guys so much for any sort of views I still get, although the algorithm may end up hating me for this. I wanted to film an outro, and I couldn't do it in my library corner. I really needed to get something out to make sure I just said bye, as well as I really wanted to just take a moment to thank you guys so much for all the love you guys have been doing on the readathon. I have been overwhelmed with how much people wanted something like this. All of the new books that I have been finding from this readathon, which has been amazing for me. Hearing you guys like enjoy these books and also say that your TBRs are growing, which means that inevitably you guys will not just be reading books by Black horror authors, thriller authors and everything just during February, but the rest of the year. And I just wanted to take some time to say that, as well as thank you all for watching this video of recommendations. I really hope that there was something here that you could watch, again, not just now during February, but the rest of the year, even having something new for the rotation for when we get to Halloween season in October. And yeah, I just wanted to get on here real quick and thank you all for that, and hope that you guys really enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Honestly, I am so close to 500 subscribers, which is something of a goal of mine. This time, like a month ago, I didn't think that hitting 500 was something that I was going to do so quickly, and I'm really thankful for it. And that really, a lot of those numbers are from you guys subscribing and watching the videos and stuff since the year has started. And again, I'm 1,000 thank yous for that. I cannot tell you how much I've appreciated it. So please subscribe down below if you did enjoy this video. I will be putting out at least 2 to 3 more videos this month surrounding Black horror and the readathon. I'm really excited for the next video I'll be putting out, which will be a read-along, so stick around to see what I'll be reading along to, as well as a discussion around Black horror. I'm still deciding whether or not that'll just be me rambling, or if I will be able to find somebody to maybe talk to and have more of a discussion about it. We'll see. I just think that it's a very interesting concept to talk more about, and if I learned anything from doing a lot of research from this challenge, I really want to share some of my thoughts with you all and also get some of your guys' thoughts also. Speaking of which, if you guys found any other recommendations that you didn't see in this video and want to share with other people, please put them down in the comments. I want to see them, let alone anybody else. So if I did miss something, if you know of some indie film that you think is dope, or some major picture that came out and I missed it, please put it down below. As you've learned, I'm pretty loose with my definition of what Black horror is. Really, I just want to see more Black people in these spaces. So if you feel like you've ran into some piece of content or artwork or whatever that really fits that criteria, please share it down below. I always love suggestions. Until next time, guys. I'll see y'all later. Thanks again. Bye.